I'm joined now by the composer and theatre impresario, Lord Lloyd Webber, and also by Madeline Lloyd Webber, and I'm very pleased to see you both. And I want to talk about the Theatre Royal in just a moment, but first, Lord Lloyd Webber, I mean, since Freedom, so-called Freedom Day, theatre performances are being cancelled across the country, from your Cinderella to community productions. Do you fear, as one producer says, that the theatre industry is being pinged into oblivion?
I fear that it's very, very difficult for any theatre show of any size to be able to operate with the current rules. In the case of Cinderella, we had somebody who was asymptomatic, had been double jabbed, who was caught by our very rigorous testing regime that we have ourselves on the way into the theatre. As a precaution, he was tested positive. As a precaution, I cancelled the shows last Saturday. And then, although every other person in the cast was negative and tested twice since that time negative, PCR tests by anybody who'd come close to him, all negative. Under the current rules, we would not have been able to reopen. So we decided that we would just have to close for the time being and hopefully reopen again when these rules are supposed to change on August the 16th. Yeah. But with this government, you never know. I mean, for some reason, theatre doesn't seem to count as having key people or key workers, whereas, of course, the England football team, of course, had key players and key workers. So we just never, ever get a crack of the whip from this government.
Right. So, I mean, it's also now hitting supermarkets, the police, railways. Do you think that self-isolation should be scrapped immediately for those who have had 2 jabs rather than waiting until mid-August?
Well, I would have thought that if you'd had 2 jabs and if you'd allowed the time lapse for them to be effective, which I believe is sort of 2 weeks, there is no real reason why you would not be able to allow, say, a theatre to operate normally. I don't see any reason. One of the most important things, and this is a point that I make time and time again, is the importance of ventilation in these buildings. And what we've seen in the last few months, and let's face it, we have seen it, and we all know that we have been into gardens where marquees have been put up, and where you find poorly ventilated marquees, or people then pinch points going to pub loos or whatever. We've seen all of this. We've seen the scenes at Wembley. We've seen the scenes, throughout this whole of the Euros. And yet, theatres and certainly in talking of my theatres, no recycled air whatsoever, state-of-the-art air conditioning and air handling. We somehow are lumped together with every other, like nightclubs and everything. We're not the same. Theatre goers are a law-abiding bunch. I would insist that our theatre goers continue to wear masks. There's not there's not a lot more one could really say.
Well, I'm do you think
frankly in despair of this government.
Right. I mean, do you think the government risks losing public consent with the way that it's going? I mean, people are perfectly willing, are they, to turn up to theatres, for instance?
Well, they are. I mean, all I can say is that I don't think I've ever had so many people get in touch with me to say that they had never believed that there would be a Conservative government who would behave this way towards such an important sector of the arts. The commercial theatre has had no support from the Cultural Recovery Fund to speak of at all. It's less than 1% of it. And a project like this, the Theatre Royal Drury Lane, which is a massive undertaking, we've had craftsmen from every area employed here. We've done massive work. But has one government minister showed today? No.
OK, so, I mean, a last word on this.
My wife, Madeline...
Yes, just a last word on this. You don't think, then, that you will be, some of your crew cast will be exempted from this, or exempt from this?
Well, it would be a wonderful thought, but I can't see very much likelihood of that happening. But what I don't understand is that they bang on and on and on, and they provide insurance for films and this, that, and the other. They don't understand that a really successful theatre production can make far more revenue for the government than a film ever can. I mean, we're standing in the Theatre Royal Drury Lane where the Disney Corporation are presenting Frozen. I got a very, very helpful email from Tom Schumacher, who is the president of the theatrical division of Disney worldwide, pointing out that The Lion King has outgrossed in the theatre, and just in the theatre, not the film, just the theatre, has outgrossed the entire Harry Potter franchise. Yeah. The entire franchise.
Well, look, we've got a couple of minutes.
The government doesn't get this.
No. Well, look, let me... Lady Madeline, I mean, the Theatre Royal is back, or will soon be back, fingers crossed, pandemic permitting. It's a positive story. Tell us what you've done to the theatre.
Well, the theatre isn't actually dependent on the show. What we've tried to do is to make this amazing space of incredible architecture and art open to the public every single day, whether there's a show on or not. People can come to Drury Lane, they can have a cocktail, they can have a cake, they can have coffee, they can have a bite to eat, and you don't need a theatre ticket. So that is why we're opening most of the theatre, the front of house theatre, tomorrow, and we're doing our open day today to show that we've actually tried to create a sort of five-star hotel feel inside a theatre. And that's been our ambition, and we've remodelled the auditorium where Frozen's coming in next month. But I'd like people actually to enjoy the theatre experience in front of house in the foyer without actually having to go into the theatre itself. And so that's been our ambition, and let's see how it goes when we open to the public tomorrow. Yeah,
well, look, I wish you luck on that. And just a final word, I mean, where do you stand then, Lord Lloyd Webber, on COVID passports? Do you think this will be a way of going forward for people who have had 2 vaccines?
I think it will have to be. I think inevitably, as in America, as they're now insisting on Broadway, it does look to me as if that's the future. And we're set up to do this, but we also would provide natural flow tests for people who haven't been vaccinated on the way in. I mean, I do worry a little bit. I mean, with Cinderella, for example, we're getting a very young audience. And I don't want to see them excluded. But I think the way things are moving, which is not necessarily my opinion, but I think the way things are moving, I think you'll find that vaccine passports are going to become more and more necessary. And, well, more and more the only way that anybody will be allowed to come into spaces, like theatres.